On today's show, the Golden State Warriors are reportedly interested in trading for Miami Heat star Jimmy Butler. Is it time for the Heat to enter a soft reboot and finally move on from the Jimmy Butler era? It's all coming up on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We have something a little bit different for you, though. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, just $5, and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. So right now, head on over to FanDuel.com. Take a look at all the wagers for this upcoming season. You can take a look at who's going to win MVP, Rookie of the Year, Sixth Man of the Season awards. Take a look at who's going to win the NBA Cup, or head on over and take a look at who's going to win the NBA Finals. Right now, the Boston Celtics still favorites to repeat at plus 300. OKC Thunder not far behind them at plus 700. You got the 76ers and Knicks tied up at plus 900 to win the title this next season. And the Denver Nuggets and Dallas Mavericks both right there at plus 1100. So go check out those odds, find a wager you like, and then get access to NFL Sunday Ticket. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Heat and Locked On NBA, Wes Goldberg. You can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Heat. And Wes, it feels like this happens every so often, but are Jimmy Butler's days numbered in Miami, right? So we had some, recent reporting from the Athletic's Sam Amick that there were calls that have taken place this offseason between the Golden State Warriors and the Miami Heat centered on Jimmy Butler. And look, if anybody knows anything about these two teams, you're the expert on Warriors and Heat, so this is perfect. Just what's your reaction to that? What would a Warriors trade package for Jimmy Butler even start to look like?
That's the big question, right? Because we know that the Warriors were in on Lauri Markkanen and Paul George, and reportedly never were willing to offer Jonathan Kuminga or Brandon Podziemski in those deals, which is a non-starter. Because now we're talking about Andrew Wiggins, maybe some first-round picks, some salary fodder, maybe Moses Moody, but no real blue chip young sort of player to build that kind of package around. And I do think that Jimmy Butler, we're talking about a different cat, right? Paul George, awesome player. Lauri Markkanen, different player. Jimmy Butler is NBA Finals tested, right? That is not something Paul George is, and it's not something that Lauri Markkanen is. And if you're the Warriors, you're obviously trying to get a co-star for Steph Curry that can help propel him to maybe a 5th championship. And Jimmy Butler kind of fits on paper. He's that inside out kind of basketball player, physical, defensive minded, all these things. Doesn't necessarily need to score 30 points to be impactful. Steph Curry can obviously still score at a high rate, more of that outside in. It's sort of a yin yang kind of partnership. And I think there would be balance there. But in terms of what the Warriors would actually be willing to give up for something like that, I think it's a fair question. Who knows? When Sam Amick says the Warriors made a call about Jimmy Butler, then that happened, right? Sam Amick is one of the best out there. I believe that had happened. The unsaid thing to me, though, is that the Heat basically just said no. And so when you ask, if Jimmy Butler's days in Miami might be numbered here, I mean, the Heat are not, at least at this point, willing to have those kinds of conversations. And so when we ask about what a potential trade package might be, I don't know that it ever even got that far. The Warriors could have called the Heat. I believe they did, right? We had that report that they called the Lakers about LeBron James before the trade deadline. They'll probably call the Bulls about Michael Jordan, right? They'll just call about anybody.
Just throwing stuff at the wall, hoping something sticks, right?
Right. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it ever got down to the point of, well, let's make some offers. Let's fire up the trade machine. Let's see what we're really talking about here. I think they inquired. I think the Heat said, we're not ready to have that kind of conversation.
So if you're a Miami Heat fan at this point, right, I guess how much pressure is on Miami to maybe, come to a resolution with Jimmy, right? Is he in Miami long-term, right? He's got 1 year left, or this season left before the player option, the final year on his deal. So if he wants to, right, if nothing happens with him by way of a trade or contract extension or anything, then he could walk next summer. And that's kind of a dangerous spot to be in if you're Miami, the threat to potentially lose Jimmy Butler Butler for nothing. So how much pressure is on Miami to at least come to some kind of a resolution here with Jimmy's future?
If there is pressure, they're not letting that out publicly. Pat Riley basically said, you know what? We don't care. Whatever the risk is, we don't want to have the conversation about an extension, and for a good reason, right? He was not available last year, hasn't played more than 65 games in a Heat uniform in a long time, and wasn't available when they needed him to be available last year, which was in the playoffs, right? Like playoff Jimmy, we never got to see it because he was hurt. And Pat Riley wants to see more. He wants to see a more engaged, motivated Jimmy Butler so that they don't have to play in the play-in tournament, so that they can just make things easier for them in the playoffs. And until you get that, he just turned 35 this weekend. Until you get that, and you feel good as an organization that he can be that for another few years under a new contract potentially, then I don't think they feel any pressure to offer it to him. This is the same organization that in the summer of 2016 let Dwayne Wade walk away to Chicago because they didn't want to pay him what Chicago was willing to pay him. Like, they are willing to break hearts, right? Like, they don't care if they think that they're making the right decision for the organization going forward. So I think if the Heat were ever to get to the point of when they are taking these phone calls, they would have to have accepted that maybe the Jimmy Butler era is over. And they have not gotten to that point. They think that this team, if it's healthy and if Jimmy Butler has a better season, can compete for a championship. Now, right, wrong, whatever, that's what they believe, and they're just not going to punt on that. We always say walk away for nothing, right? Like, Jimmy Butler can walk away for nothing next year. But 1 year of great basketball isn't nothing, right? If he walks away after another year of great basketball, that's something that I think the Heat value.
That's going to be, and that's where I think you start getting into the territory of, man, is Pat Riley and the Heat kind of, brain trust? Are they misguided in feeling this way? Because you look at the state of the Eastern Conference, you look at kind of the arms race at the top of the Eastern Conference in particular. Do you think this Miami team, when healthy, can still hold a candle to some of the powers at the top of the Eastern Conference, the way things have shifted, especially this past offseason?
I'm on record as saying I don't think the Heat are as good as the top teams in the East. They are not as good as the Boston Celtics, who won the conference by 14 games last year. They would have won the conference even if Jimmy Butler had a better regular season. Like that, as the Celtics are, they could be a dynasty in the making. I mean, that is an awesome basketball team. The Philadelphia 76ers, having added Paul George, all those things. I think the Milwaukee Bucks are kind of being slept on a little bit. I think the talent on paper is awesome, even with that team. And yes, I will never count out the Miami Heat. How could you? You cannot count out the Heat with Jimmy Butler, Eric Spoelstra, and everything that they got going on. But on paper, which is all we have right now because the season hasn't started and the games haven't been played, all we have is paper, right? Those teams are better on paper. And so if the Heat do think that they can make a run at this thing, they've got their work cut out for them, and it's going to take some breaks. And it's going to take maybe the best season that the Heat have ever seen from Jimmy Butler, if they actually want to accomplish the thing that they have not accomplished, which is obviously winning the championship.
I keep coming back to the idea that Miami seems almost poised for a soft reboot, right? Talking about the end of potentially the Jimmy Butler era. If you are able to come away with some type of maybe not like, the Godfather offers that we've seen for certain marquee players, in these past couple years, but if you come away with something good for Jimmy Butler, a blue chip prospect or two, some future draft capital, this Miami Heat team suddenly, Bam, your best player at just 27 years old. You still got Tyler Herro. You just drafted Kel'el Ware. Like, there's a lot of young talent. I'm missing some names here, right? But like up and down the roster, it almost seems like this would be the perfect time to close the chapter on the Jimmy Butler saga and set yourself up for maybe when some of the powers at the top of the Eastern Conference start to wane just a little bit, rather than hoping for one last rodeo, I guess.
Yeah, if you just pluck Jimmy Butler off this roster and don't change anything else, you look at a team that is built through the draft. And we're talking about the Miami Heat, who were never built through the draft. You had Pat Riley openly make fun of the draft. And 10 years ago, he just didn't value it. And now the whole tenor of the conversation around the NBA draft has changed. A lot of that is due to the realities of the CBA and the difficulties of team building and all these things. But this is a team that has embraced the NBA draft. They haven't had a bad first-round pick, Jackson, in a long time. It's been like almost 10 years. Bam Adebayo, Tyler Herro, Nikola Jovic, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Kel'el Ware looks like a stud, or he looked like one in the summer league in Las Vegas. So these guys, and then not to mention some of the undrafted guys that they find, Duncan Robinson's, Haywood Highsmith, like all these guys, this is a team that has been very much developed through the draft and through its player development program. Jimmy Butler is obviously the head of the snake, and they traded for him. But if you're going to trade Jimmy Butler away, I think you're right. You could still do a soft reboot. You still have Bam Adebayo, who's like an all-NBA caliber guy. It's not like this team is starting from nothing, to your point. And if you can get one more guy in that building, then who kind of fits on that timeline of all these guys that have been developed and are younger, then yeah, I think you're probably taking a calculated step back, but you're setting yourself up for maybe something in the future.
Is it time for a soft reboot in Miami? How much longer? What'll happen with the future of Jimmy Butler? You're gonna have us covered for all of that and so much more over at Locked On Heat. Wes, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Thanks, man.